Buenos días a todos. Bienvenidos en Smart Cities. Welcome in Smart Cities Barcelona. I have the privilege to share the first session, and I've been impressed in preparing it with the CVs of the people that are going to address you, and not only the CVs, but their willingness to find positive solution for the future of the cities. I would like to say that the slogan, think globally and act locally, has been developed by the French philosopher Jacques Ellul. And personally, I am very close to him for a number of issues, but I disagree a lot with him on one main topic. Jacques Ellul was really a great man and a great philosopher of the end of the 20th century, but he mistrust technique. He didn't like the technique. He believed that techniques was bringing painful to the society and problems, all sorts of problems, not only environmental problems. I hope that this session will show you that it is the reverse. Techniques, technologies, science are there to bring progress to the society, are there to bring development, are there to bring quality. Cities are the center of our modern life. We are not going back to the Eden. It's a dream to believe that we are going back to bucolic and green field where citizens were living in campaign. No, the future of life is definitively cities. And therefore, we have a big challenge ahead to introduce more intelligence in handling the cities. Another thing that we should never forget is that it's impossible to do anything in life without energy. When we were at school, we were told in the physics class that energy is the same notion of work. Work is energy. Work is measured in joule, energy is measured in joule. That means that it's impossible to do anything in life without energy. It's impossible to have a city that will not use energy. We need to be more efficient the way we use energy. But we have not to dream that we can live without energy. It's impossible. Physics gave us the solution. Impossible to do anything without energy. And don't misunderstand me. It's not because we are looking, and we need to look more at efficiency, that we can say we do not need energy. The world will need energy. It will not be reduced. With a growing population, with a growing quality of life, we will need energy. All the scenarios give a tendency of an increased demand of energy. Therefore, the issues that we are addressing is not disappearing, it will remain. The question of energy in the cities is crucial because energy is at the heart of cities and smart cities, of course. It is there for transport, for health, for public safety, for utilities, social service, environment, urban waste. Everything is linked with energy. And therefore, it's clear that we need to find solutions. Wind and solar are nowadays normal development, but it's not sufficient. We need to integrate them. We need to integrate them, and for that we need breakthrough in paradigms. We need to change things. It will not come overnight. It will take time, but we need to tackle this activities. Therefore, I would like that we have a debate on the futurist vision of the cities and how to integrate energy with positive solutions. We are here, I believe, to find dynamic and positive solution for our future. We will start with Reinhold Hackert. He is from ThyssenKrupp, a German company which is working a lot on technologies. Reinhold was before with Siemens, and therefore he has a double vision of a company like Siemens working a lot on electronics, and now with ThyssenKrupp, a company which is working much more on materials. And I think that this double asset gives him a lot of strength to address us. He's head of corporate center and innovation and quality. Reinhold, can you tell us what is your vision of the material and energy link in the new cities? Because you are developing a lot of new ideas, which when you present that, you say, it's banal. Why don't we think to that before?
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you very much, Sam, for the kind introduction. I think, as you are 100% right, I think we need energy, and it's really a question how we use the energy, and specifically as more and more people are moving into major cities, I think it's extremely important how we use the energy specifically in cities. And I think it's already known that roughly 40% of the energy consumed in cities is consumed by buildings. So I think on one hand we have to make inner parts of city more efficient, but specifically we have to look at buildings as well. And when you talk about ThyssenKrupp, I think ThyssenKrupp is a technology company with a very broad spectrum. So we are addressing components, we are addressing systems, but we produce steel. But we as well are, as I always like to say, in the business of moving people. And when we talk about moving people, we are not only talk about elevators, escalators, we talk really moving people in city centers or moving people in basically buildings. And the question is really when we use energy, and this was the discussion you started, is basically how efficient are we using basically the energy. And for that reason, we are trying to find solutions which move people in the inner city, in the last mile, in the most efficient way. And here on the Expo, we have a booth, and you will see some solutions we are basically offering. And it's all about increasing efficiency. So we have basically a moving walk, which is called Axle, which basically can accelerate the people, because obviously there's a certain speed when you step on a walk, you cannot be accelerated immediately, but you have to be accelerated on the walk. And this is basically a technology we are offering, we introduced in the market recently, but basically to move people faster over the last mile, basically can be done in inner parts of city, can be done in airports, and it's accelerating while people are on that moving walk. And this is done with a technology, with linear motors, which is derived from Transrapid. You may remember the elevated train, and this is basically a technology we brought back into the business now with this very fast moving walk, and we can bring 30% more people faster to the target where they want to go. I think another way how we are more efficient is basically in buildings. Basically, because in buildings there's always discussion how much of floor space are you using for elevators. And for that reason, we need more efficient elevators. And for that reason, ThyssenKrupp is offering elevators with 2 cabins that we basically have in one shaft, 2 cabins, which obviously increases dramatically the number of people moved. And again, it's much more energy efficient as well. And another way of moving more people in smaller buildings is basically our studio solution, which has no counterweight. That means instead of 4 people or 6 people, 8 people are fitting into such an elevator. Again, it's about efficiency. And the other thing is basically that elevators are accelerated and are decelerated. And that means we have the opportunity, basically when we decelerate, we can feed the energy which was used accelerating the cabin, we can feed it back into the grid. And this is another way, basically reusing energy which was already spent by feeding it back into the grid. And how efficient this is, you basically can see we are in the moment building the elevators for the World Trade Center in New York, one of the highest buildings of the world. And the energy which is fed back through decelerating elevators is basically equal to the energy which is needed for the lighting of the whole building. So I think it's really a relevant amount we are really bringing in. And the idea is basically that we do not only develop isolated solutions, we basically have as well to connect those solutions. For that reason, we really develop connected solutions where we basically bring technologies from moving people together with other businesses from ThyssenKrupp, basically, like we're building a very lightweight steel structure where we can elevate bicycle ways in cities, because in major cities it's extremely difficult to bring in bicycle right ways into the city. And if we really elevate it, put it on a very lightweight structure, it can be integrated nicely in already existing cities. So I think it's not only about elevators, it's really about integrating many solutions. And last but not least, I would like to mention our activities in really making cars more efficient, be it the classical cars or even electric cars. So we are developing a lot of car components which make cars more efficient. So I think it's really about a number of technologies, introducing it into the world, but what is extremely important from my point of view, really integrating it as well. I think so an integrated solution and a lot of technologies, and I think a number of my colleagues will talk about it, how we can basically optimize the integration. I think so we will hear about it definitely later.
Thank you, Reynold. I mean that you are working in the same direction, that electrical car can recover energy, right. On electrical train can recover energy, but for that we need to also to integrate the surplus of electricity which is generated by those systems. And I turn to Donald Sadoway, because you are a specialist of integrating the surplus of energy. We have a lot of wind and solar energy, and also, like we heard, with other systems, but we have an issue how to store this energy to recover it when we need it. And you are a specialist in batteries, in materials. You are a professor in MIT, and you have been named one of the Times Magazine top 100 most influential people in the world in 2012 for your continuing work in improving batteries. So when I will have problem with my batteries in my smartphone, I know where to come now, because we have all the same problem with smartphone, batteries. What is the future of storage of energy, Donald?
Well, I'm sorry, I don't have a remedy for all of your problems just yet, but I will say that there is a bright future, but we need to be realistic that smart city is an electric city. The world that we know today and the world that we expect to see come with, you'll hear people talk about big data and so on, all of this is predicated on the existence of uninterruptible electricity. Communication, internet, all of this requires electricity. Without electricity, it's dead. And 2 out of 7 people on the planet don't have access to electricity. So we need to electrify everybody so that everybody can participate. And we don't have to electrify by connecting long copper wires to the existing grid. We can drop in electricity, just as in some parts of the world they never had landlines for telephones. They went directly from nothing to wireless communication. But if we're going to have a sustainable future and an electric future, we have to think about a vision that has electricity generated without burning carbon, and then the deployment of electricity in carbon-free ways. And we can get there. All industrial chemistry can become industrial electrochemistry. But let's now get to the question of integration of renewables. You know, the electricity powering the lights here was generated just moments ago. It's crazy. The grid is the largest distribution system with zero inventory. Imagine if every time you wanted to take a shower, it has to be raining. This is the way the grid operates. And the grid operates so that the demand will always be met. And the demand varies widely throughout the day. But we have to be ready for the maximum demand. And that means there is so much idle capacity. And the key to leveling all of this capacity is storage. With the battery, we could change even the conventional grid, make it more reliable, make it more efficient, and by efficient, I mean use it all the time. You realize that the typical European, North American city, the peak demand is 40–50% above average. 40–50% above average. Imagine if you and I started an airline, and for 360 days a year, 40% of our airplanes sit on the ground. And then the remaining 5 days, everybody flies because the demand is high. You'd say that's a crazy business model. I'd say that's called the grid. Now we have to change that, and we're going to change it with storage. And then that will allow the intermittent renewables, wind, which blows when it wants, the sun, which normally shines between sunrise and sunset, although it's been known to rain in some parts of the world, in which case your solar intensity goes down. If we could capture that energy when it's being generated and have it in batteries in your own homes, in your own office buildings, then we would have much, much more uniform utilization, much less generation of pollution per unit of electricity, and a more efficient deployment. So I'm very excited about the future because let's not forget where electricity was invented, at the university by a professor, Alessandro Volta. And he gave us not only electrochemistry, he gave us electroforming, electroplating, and he demonstrated for the first time the utility of a professor. Until Volta, no one imagined a professor could be of any use. But he changed all of that, and I'm happy to say the tradition continues, so stay tuned.
Let's hope that Donald Sadoway will be the future Volta for the storage. I wish you that you are becoming really a new Volta, because really we need storage definitively. I'm turning now to Michael Dixon. He is the general manager of IBM for Global Smart Earth Cities business. He's traveling everywhere in the world trying to deal with this big challenge of intelligent cities. And you cannot act if you don't know exactly on what you are acting. You cannot act if you do not measure. And once that you measure, you have data. And Michael, you are a specialist of big data. You have availability for a lot of data. What are you going to do with all those data to introduce intelligence in the cities?
Well, thanks, Professor Fari. I'd like to make 3 points this morning, and the first, as you've introduced me, is about the role of data in society today. In IBM, in our Smarter Cities world, we talk about the 3 I's that really drive the industry today. And those 3 I's are, firstly, instrumented. And what we're seeing now around the world is the proliferation of data at unprecedented volumes. Huge amounts of data are being presented every day by all manner of devices. All manner of instruments are measuring everything from activities around cattle growing in fields through to water flowing in pipes. And so this data is being generated, but it then needs to be transported and brought somewhere. And that's where we talk about interconnected. The idea of using the networks that we've been speaking about this morning to bring this data to where it's needed. And the third I, where IBM particularly specialises, is in the intelligent part of that. what is it that this data tells us? Data on its own doesn't tell us anything. We have to get information from it with which, as Professor said, we can then manage and measure as a result of what we find out. Harvard is increasingly talking about fact-based or evidence-based management. It's not enough for people like me and those here on the stage with me to say, well, we have a good education and lots of experience and common sense and we can make the right decisions. Today, it's all about the facts. And there are lots of examples of where people have found astonishing facts that really bring a new light to something that we're looking at. And so smarter cities today is a concept that we all talk about, particularly in a forum like this, where we all talk about smarter cities if we know what it is. Certainly my experience in travelling around the world is that smarter cities means different things to different cities. Different cities have different problems, different strengths, different advantages, and apply their focus in different ways. They work on transport, issues with natural or man-made disasters, issues around water, public safety, health, social services, education, and of course energy. So the first point I want to make is that data and the analytics that go with it provide the basic underpinning of so many projects in smarter cities, and we have to think about the policy and what it is we're measuring so we can then manage it to affect change. The second point I'd like to make is about energy and the way in which energy will evolve in years to come. If you take my first point about data, we are now getting unprecedented information about the generation, wholesaling, retailing, and consumption of energy. And that gives us a whole range of opportunities that we've not had before. We get the opportunity to balance different energy sources in all sorts of ways in different environments. In my view, this will bring around massive disruption to those industries and a very significant blurring of the distinction between them. In many places in the world, we're already facing the blurring in cities around public, private sector, national, provincial, regional, local governments, and all manner of different industry objectives as they come together to solve problems. Nowhere is that going to be more evident than in energy in years to come, where, as Professor just said, electricity is essential for absolutely everything. To optimise that in all its various sources will take a great deal of information and a great deal of decision making, which will change the way in which these requirements are balanced. So the second point I'd like to make is that, just as I said in transport, we're seeing the revolutionising of transport around the world in years to come, the management of water, issues around public safety, energy, buildings. You think about a company like Loader in India building greenfields developments. From the outset, these greenfields sites very much focused on effective energy distribution in the most optimum way. So these kinds of blurring distinctions, I think, give us huge amounts of opportunity for innovation. We're seeing in cities like Kitakyushu in Japan, as a result of their focus there on brown coal and their move away from that, the events in the Tohoku Peninsula have changed the way in which Japan views its energy and changes the way in which it's increasingly working on it. The third point I'd like to make is around what we call engagement. The bedrock of all this, if data is most important as a means of getting things done, the beneficiaries of that are the people. And I think the way in which people are engaging in these systems is at the heart of the success that we'll have in years to come. Whether it's energy, transport, water, or other things, you look at the people here in the room this morning, or the conference indeed, so many people want to be part of this. And we're seeing the rise of social media as a basis on which people can express an opinion in a very thoughtful and considered way for the first time. So mobile access is a critical part of this, the ability to be able to do it in a secure way, but to generate ideas both as individuals and as interested groups to affect policy, I think again will be a critical point in the way in which smarter cities evolve to address energy and the other areas which I've mentioned. So in summary, the three things I think are really important. Data is something that is a fantastic and valuable asset. In many ways, it is and has become the currency of the 21st century. Second, the way in which this data is going to be applied to energy will transform all of the industries and bring about satellite industries that are brought with innovation that we're only beginning to see the possibility for. And thirdly, the rise of people and their way in which they can communicate and drive these agendas through effective policy to bring about meaningful change, I think, is perhaps the most exciting initiative of all.
Thank you, Michael. How to integrate people into this process, and then we are turning now to the last two speakers, which are much more close to the citizen because they are both elected and dealing with cities. The first one is Macon Cowles. He is elected in the city of Boulder in Colorado, and he is a lawyer which has had a lot of interest on environment. He defends also a lot of people against the Exxon Valdez issue, and a lawyer for civil rights. So you are close to citizens, close to people, I believe, Malcolm. I would like to ask you, how do you see the link between government, cities, and people? Because at the end we need to integrate all the three actors. We can expect to receive technologies, but then how to integrate whom is doing what?
So good morning, everybody. I come at this, the work that I do now as a city councilor from the standpoint, first of all, as an environmentalist. And what I came to realize, like probably many of you, is that we cannot save the wild places of the world. We can't save the planet in which we live on unless we get the metabolism of the cities right. And the challenge that we have in making this link between technology and the people is really one of imagination, that we have to reimagine a way of life, a different way of doing things. Climate change, we must recognize, is fundamentally an energy problem. And to change the way in which we use energy so that we can keep the planet from burning up, we have to change the infrastructure that we use, but we have to change our thinking. People have to change their thinking. So I come from a city that is very progressive on the issue of climate change and the policies and programs that we implement in order to reduce people's energy and increase the amount of renewable energy that we use. While the United States, the national government has been extremely resistant to addressing climate change, our city and other cities in the United States have pulled together to try to figure out how we can address these problems by developing programs that will incentivize the creation of renewable energy resources at the local level, that will enhance the development of distributed generation so that we can share energy from producers to users across our cities. And we have tremendous obstacles in this. But in our city, we actually enacted a carbon tax about 8 years ago that would fund the programs that would develop more energy-efficient buildings, that would help people to put solar photovoltaic arrays on their roofs, that would change the way in which they get around our city so that they're using bicycles more, they're walking more to their destination, and using public transportation. We've done all of these. But what we realized in an analysis after 6 years, and by the way, for our city, we adopted the Kyoto Protocol goal, reducing energy 7% below what it was at 1990. And we now have the more aggressive policy of wanting to be carbon neutral in our use of energy by 2050. What we realized is that in implementing these programs, and in our city we have about 15 of them that are addressed at increasing renewables, reducing energy use, that if we don't take control of the grid itself, the way in which power is generated and delivered to individual customers, we'll never get to this goal. And so in our city right now, we are buying the distribution grid from the utility that now delivers power to us because they provide too much power from coal, about 62% right now. And we realize that at the end of this process, which will take until 2017, we started it in 2012, but at the end of this process, we'll be able to reduce the carbon intensity of our energy by half on day one. This will get us past the goal that we had of an 80% reduction in energy use by 2050, but it will not get us to carbon neutrality by that time. And so we're working with, we realize that we don't know enough about how energy is used in people's houses so that we can help them change their habits. And we have now entered into a series of things where we measure carefully the electricity of a group of people and group of businesses in our town so that we can understand more about how energy is used from a day-to-day basis. This will enable us to work with the innovators, the first adopters, those citizens we have in our city that demand that we reduce our energy and increase renewables. This will enable us to work with them, with this new, armed with information, and change the way of thinking of the general population in our city to help bring them along. Because people fundamentally want a better future for themselves and their children and their grandchildren. They don't want this planet to burn up. So with the information and the technologies that some of the rest of you folks are developing, we hope that, that our government at the city level and working with other cities around our country and around the world, that we will be able to lead to a better future. We have to keep pushing on these doors until they open. With the exception of Germany, there's almost a complete failure of national leadership in addressing climate change. But the cities of the world are realizing that to make a better life for their people and to protect the planet, that we have to get together city to city and move our national governments in that direction.
Thank you, Macon. We now turn to Joost van Keulen. He is vice mayor, alderman, and vice mayor of the city of Groningen in north of Netherlands. Probably our friends coming from outside EU doesn't know that Groningen is a very important city in the history of energy, because a lot of gas has been discovered there in the 60s or 50s even maybe. And still, Netherlands is still one of the big gas producers in Europe. And particularly the northern part of Europe is using this gas from Groningen. Gas is much more clean than others energies, including producing less CO2, but it's still a fossil fuel. So we have a dilemma in Groningen, because they are developing a lot of industrial activities with gas. I even teach to my students about the Dutch disease, which has emerged from your city, Mr. van Keulen. But you want to have nowadays a city of talent, a smart user city. How do you integrate citizens in this difficult dilemma? Yeah. On one part, they are working on producing gas, and other part, you want them to be in a clean and modern city.
Yeah. Thank you. First, I'm very sorry about this, but I really have to correct you. We are not some sort of a Sheikh oil gas funded big city we are not that rich in Groningen, really not. And there is no dilemma. There is no dilemma. It's not like we are not convinced that we need this transition from gas and coal, but also from gas to more sustainable and renewable forms of energy. In fact, it's our citizens that are saying to us, well, you have to help us, facilitate us in our need to be more energy efficient, to be more green. And I don't know, maybe it's because of the characteristics of our city. We have a very young city, about 200,000 people, 50% of them is my age, 35 or younger. So that helps, I think, to make this city alive. 50,000 we have 50,000 students on a university or a college degree in our town. And 50% of our workforce has a college or university degree. So we are a very smart city, to be modest. But we really feel the need to change, and we really feel the need to help our citizens be more green and be more energy efficient. And that's why we actually help them to bring their own ideas to life. So there's not really a need for a government to say, well, you should be more green, you should be more energy efficient. It's more like, it comes automatically. It's more like grassroots. I don't know why it's happening in Groningen, but it actually is happening. We have citizens starting their own energy corporation with their solar panels on the roof. We actually have a football club with a stadium, and on top of this stadium they installed 1,100 solar panels, and they're selling them, and they're selling the energy, so the fans can buy FC Groningen University of electricity. And that's, I think all those kinds of movements are really helping to bring the power literally to the people. People are able to make their own choice in their energy supply. We have, we were discussing this in front. It's quite an embarrassment to say, I think, that we actually have a real smart grid, which means we have a street where people actually exchange electricity. So when my solar panel is in the shadows and my neighbor, and I want to do the laundry, but my washing machine hasn't enough power, I can actually get my neighbor to bring me the electricity. And that's how we try to balance and in fact try to solve this battery, this overcapacity problem. And it's quite embarrassment to say, but I think we're the first really smart grid in the world, and we only have 42 households actually in this smart grid. So we are looking for ways to upscale this, and it's really, for me, the most important thing is that it's coming from the bottom up. It's our people who want help in changing the way we work. So we don't need to buy the grids, because the people are saying to their energy suppliers, hey, we don't accept this anymore. We go to that energy corporation called Groninger Power, where we are sure that we can have green energy. We are actually trying to slow down all the companies and all the people who are trying to buy acres for solar fields. It's going really fast, and I'm really proud of that. So of course we need technology, and we need to develop it more, and I think that's a great thing to do in the universities and in the companies. But the most important thing is, I think, that we absolutely need the people and the drive of the people, not only as a customer, but also as a citizen, to help and change this energy solution world.
Thank you very much. We have now half an hour of debate amongst us before giving the possibility to the floor to raise questions also. I would like to start with a question to Donald. You see that from cities, they are expecting something to offer rapidly to the citizen, because citizens are expecting. And elected people want to please the citizen, and therefore they would like to do as much as possible rapidly. But how many years are you working on batteries to find solutions? How do you, can we reconcile this pressure of the street with the length of research and development? What is your vision on that?
Well, I think that people might be a little bit frustrated. It's always hard to manage expectations when you're trying to predict the future. Niels Bohr said that prediction is always difficult, especially when it's about the future. So I can't tell you when the batteries will arrive, but I think that it's a case of growing demand, which is putting more pressure on people to focus efforts on coming up with cost-affordable solutions that are scalable for this market. We see the rapid growth in mobile devices and the power supplies for them. If you think back 20 years ago, there wasn't the need for batteries that could last so long, but now there is, and we've come a long way. The major hurdle is still stationary storage for grid level. But I'm optimistic, and you know, I could say, well, why don't we have a cure for cancer? What's taking so long? It's a really tough problem. And by the way, you know, for those of you who are interested in working on these tough problems, there are tough problems in things like data, for example. Well, data is all about the mind, and it's time on task. You don't have to fight with real things. So you put enough brilliant people in a room long enough, and they come up with the software, with the new applications and so on. But the path to a new process to make metal, or a new device that can store gigawatt hours of electricity, it's a very, very long path, which takes a long time and a lot of money. And people grow impatient. Investors grow impatient. They grow impatient with the professors. They think the professors aren't doing their job. It's just a very tough job. But I don't see people saying, well, you haven't found a cure for cancer, so you guys are a bunch of fools. We're stopping the effort. But when it comes to energy, you even began today by condemning me with your phone. They come to me in social settings to tell me how bad the battery is. Now, stop picking on me. This is not right. You should be encouraging people to continue to work for the solution, and you will see it come.
But is it
Yes?
is the technical problem, or is it a problem that everybody's still buying those smartphones, even though we all know the batteries aren't that good? Should we just stop buying them for a couple of years, wait till there are better batteries, and will that, in fact, fasten the process? What's the problem here?
Well, the problem is that the nature of the storage device for mobile applications is very different from the nature of the storage device for stationary applications. So we have very good batteries for the mobile phones, for the laptop computer, and so on. But even when it comes to the all-electric vehicle, the batteries are still far too costly. In stationary storage, we're not there yet. But I think that the solution is at hand because people are working on the right problem. And the problem is cost. They have to be low cost, and they have to have a long service lifetime. Your phone battery dies in about 2-3 years. You know, so that's not good enough.
I'd wish.
I know, industry has to deal with that.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And I think Donald is exactly right. I think we have to solve the problem, but there's not only one problem. And for that reason, there's not only one solution. I think what we have to think about is basically if we really want to solve all the problems we have in the world, energy-related problems, I think we basically have to think about a kind of a mosaic, meaning a picture which is consisting of many stones, of many little stones, and only if we put the stones together in a right way with smart algorithms, we basically will solve the problem. So I think there is not one solution, there's a huge variety of solutions, And this is not only a solution we can solve inner cities, a city is an element of it, it's industry, it's bringing things together. And I think when we talk about renewable energy, the problem is basically that the power is generated from renewable sources when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining. And obviously we would like to use it even if it's dark and no wind is there. For that reason, we need a kind of storage on one hand, and I think there's batteries, there's redox flow system, there's many ways of storing it. But on the other hand, the other solutions as well, we have to be more flexible in how and when we use power. And I don't mean we have to boil our breakfast egg when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, because those are the minor things.
No, we will not accept that. Huh?
Exactly, nobody would do it. For that reason, we basically have to think about processes which can work in the background. Or we have to think about industry topics which basically can be better controlled, can be better scheduled, again, with smart algorithms. So I think really the combination of all it and really creating a smarter environment will help us definitely to be more flexible, to have storage, to have a smarter grid. So many, many elements will form a solution.
Michael.
Well, I think Donald is 100% right, but I think he's on the wrong end of the problem. So I think Donald is quite rightly talking about the challenges associated with supply. Supply is not the problem. Demand's the problem. There's so much demand because people want to use these capabilities. We look back, I think it's extraordinary that we can have a mobile phone and be cursing Donald and his team because the battery's flat, yet just a few years ago we couldn't dream of the function that's in that phone. So I think the really interesting thing is what does this mean for cities around the world, and what's the demand that is being driven in areas like transport and water and public safety and education, health and social services, where people want the best of everything and they want it immediately. It's like the old Billy Connolly gag, you know, I want everything and I want it now. And I think that's the really exciting thing. So where I see the real challenge for us is for cities to establish their priorities, to work out what is important. How do I establish what's the most important thing to me? Is it zero carbon, as Copenhagen has chosen? Is it food traceability, which is so important to the Hokkaido Peninsula? Is it traffic congestion, which is such a problem in China? Is it the entire minerals and resources industry, which is such a focus for Australia? These are the things that really matter, and I think it's how we worry about demand and how people like those in the room that are really driving policy will really make an impact on cities which are effectively competing with each other on GDP, and I think that's where the rubber really hits the road.
I'm turning with, yes?
Well, what we've learned through our looking at power use in the city of Boulder, Colorado, and the programs that we've been implementing over the last, actually in transportation over the last 20 years, is that you have to have goals that are realistic. You have to look at them periodically, measure your progress against those goals. And you have to have a plan that has both short-term, medium, and long-term elements to it. As an example, vehicle miles traveled over the world has been rising dramatically, but particularly in the United States and in China. In 1993, in our town, we adopted a goal in transportation of no increase in vehicle miles traveled to keep them level. And this was a very ambitious goal because the vehicle miles traveled in our region were steadily going up year by year, 3% and 4% a year. What we were able to do at the government level, at the local level, is change the way in which we invest in infrastructure. So we took previous to that, about 2/3 of the amount of money that we spent on transportation was spent on automobile and motor vehicle infrastructure, on roads, on intersections, things like that. And only 1/3 on pedestrian and bike and public transportation. We flipped that in our town. And so for the last 20 years, we've been spending most of our dollars, almost 2/3 of the transportation dollars, on bike, pedestrian, and public transportation, investing in buses and ways in which bicycles can be used in our town so that it's safer. For example, we have a town of 100,000, half of the size of Groningen, and we have 25,000 students. It's a small city, 5 miles by 6 miles, and yet we've put 76 underpasses so that cyclists can go right under the roads in their crossings, pass safely and not have to slow down. It is the role of government in this is really to overcome the obstacles that we now have in the way of doing business on a day-to-day basis. So we can't do what Groningen does and share power between neighbors so that if your solar panels are in shade, I can provide your house with power from mine. That is illegal in our structure. That's why we're buying the grid. But it is important to let those younger voices come and lay out a vision for the elders. You're lucky, Don, if at cocktail parties the only thing you're asked about is batteries, because Joost and I will be asked about how the sewer is running, where's the water, to fix the roads, the bicycle paths, all of this.
Traffic lights are off.
Donald, what do you think of that?
There's all sorts of stuff on the streets. No.
Oh, I think they have a very difficult burden. I invite you to walk a mile in my shoes. I think, though, that in the interests of accuracy, that while we could do better in managing how we use energy, the rise in population and the growth of cities is going to outpace everything that we can do in terms of moderating demand, unless we get to the point where we order when people are free to eat their breakfast and when they're free to launder their clothes. Short of that, there will be peak demands. And so I say we have to resort to all of the above. We will need technological solutions, and we will use the smart city information structure to try to moderate to the greatest extent we can. But there is no single solution here. If people think that's the case, they're going to be disappointed.
Yes, that's a problem, because nowadays we have a population which is really convinced that the solution is there, and it's a little bit more complicated. It needs more time and much more money, which is for an industry a big challenge, because you need to invest a lot to be sure to recover also.
Right. And I think it is 100 right. There will be peak demands, but this is, from my point of view, not a given. I think through making consumers more flexible, and in many ways making consumers even producers, meaning prosumers. For example, my own house is basically, I'm producing my own power with photovoltaics. I have my house is heated by the heat of the earth. So I try to make basically my house more or less self-sufficient. And basically this should be end in a smart grid, as you described, Joost. And then we basically have smart areas which are connected as well. So I think this is something where we can reduce the peak times. But on the other hand, we really have to convince people to change their life in a way which is acceptable to them. As I said, I don't want to force them to boil their breakfast egg when the wind is shining, or the sun is shining, or the wind is blowing. But we can change habits. And basically changing habits means we have to define an environment that we really would like to do it. And coming back to the example of bicycles, the state of North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany basically has a plan now to build bicycle highways. First they try to use old railway tracks basically because they are very nice and flat and they're already built in a good way. But they as well would like to have access to the inner part of city with those bicycle highways. And so we are proposing very lightweight steel structures which basically allow to integrate it in already built cities in a nice way, a bicycle highway, and not only work on the railway tracks on the free green field, but as well bring those people into inner cities. So there has to be an offering. And there are cities in Germany like Münster or Erlangen, which already have a very nice structure for bicycles. And as I said earlier, the state of North Rhine-Westphalia is trying to introduce this now in a very densely populated area, the Ruhr area, very industrial area as well. And the technology, from my point of view, is there.
Macon, you want to react on that?
Well, I think one of the things that the group here is saying is that there is a very broad, diverse approach to addressing some of these issues. And I'm often asked, what are the three things or what things distinguish a Smarter Cities project that is successful? And I think, certainly from my point of view, there are three things that really stand out. And the first is the projects that are really leading have followed a real problem. So the shed's on fire, you've got to do something. You know, people don't sit around saying, well, we've got not much to do, what can we do? They do something because there's a real problem. And so if you look at the real advances in things like pandemic management we've been involved in, the issues around some of these terrible diseases that are spreading around the world, natural disasters like Cyclone Hainan in the Philippines, the kinds of things, you know, the terrible disaster we saw in Nairobi last year, these kinds of things promote huge jumps in innovation. So the first thing is, I think, innovation comes from a very critical problem that needs to be solved. It typically doesn't come from kind of organic trying. It comes from something that really gets people focused. It brings capital, it brings focus, it brings innovation, it brings people to the issue. The second thing that stands out is there's got to be a business case. Yeah, you know, meet lots and lots of people. I'm yet to meet anybody that says, Dixon, we've got too much money, you know, what can we buy from you guys, you know?
Governments normally do that.
Never. You know, it must have a business case. And I think one of the things that really distinguishes many of these projects is if it doesn't improve service and reduce cost, it doesn't happen because nobody's got extra money to make some of these happen. And the third thing is the thing that we never escape, it's been around for centuries, and that's leadership. I don't think committees and groups of people do things. You can always go to these projects and find the individual that sponsored it, felt responsible for it, was accountable for it, and delivered it. So I think innovation comes from that kind of set of circumstances.
I'd like to add something.
Yes,
because
and then I would like to raise a question of a different topic.
Okay, we all talk about these smart cities, and I think there is not one solution for all the different cities. Every city has its own problems and should look for its own solutions. For example, we have about 60% of all the traffic movement in our city, 60% almost, is by bike, which is great. Except when you see everybody taking their bike to our city center, parking it on the pavement, in fact, completely blocking every access you have. So we have to solve that problem. What I'm trying to say is every city has its own qualities and also its own downsides. And I think we should look for not one solution for every problem, but to really focus on different aspects of the city and build solutions around the problems they actually have.
I would like to be the troublemaker now. And to change topic. In Europe, as an average in the European Union, electricity represents 22% of the final energy. 28% is the fuel for transportation, and 50% is for heating. Heating is the poor relative in our energy policy. 40% of energy is used under the roof, and 80% of this 40 is heating. It's not electricity. Electricity is the key. Without electricity, there is no more developed world, of course. But what can we do in cities to address this challenge of heating?
I think what is a very interesting point you're bringing up, because in the moment people tend to think about power and heating and all those things as separate things. And from my point of view, we're talking energy and no longer the different forms of energy. And from my point of view, and this is a huge opportunity we have, and we are working on concepts in our company as well, where we basically say we discuss energy and we say we use the different forms of energy. So energy is transferable. You have always, with transferring energy into different forms, you're losing something. You have to optimize it, which comes again back to the optimization. But in principles, heat can be brought into electrical energy. Obviously, it's very easy to heat up with electrical energy as well. So you can transfer it both ways. And we have to think more integrated and to think more in reuse, basically. And as I said earlier, in smaller areas where you basically bring everything together and you try to optimize your small area, then you have to look into bigger areas where we say, how can the next level be optimized, integrating already optimized small areas, and so on and so on. So I think this is an opportunity we have to use, and this is a smart way of really transferring energy into different forms. It's chemical storage, it's heat, it's electricity, it's elevating things in an elevator, as I said earlier, and recuperating while we are braking or while we're going down. So there are many ways. Everything sounds small, but the whole sum of many small things creates a huge amount.
Well,
Michael, you are coming from Melbourne, and maybe in Melbourne you don't need to heat too much the houses. But in a lot of cities, and particularly in China, they need to heat houses. Do you think that you can provide some development also in the way people are able to manage their consumption of energy in the houses?
Well, I think it's part of the bigger picture, but certainly the two areas of the world that I think are making some great progress in this area are the Nordic countries, which are increasingly doing the kinds of projects that Joost and others have been speaking about, which is operating in a way in which electricity which is generated at off-peak times is used by neighbours during peak hours and other times. And we're seeing that very much being supported by car manufacturers who are very interested in the charging of batteries for cars and how that will be plugged into the grid and managed over time. I think the second thing that really stands out is the way in which the Japanese society, which is already a very community-focused and community-oriented society, has really embraced the challenge of shutting down their nuclear reactors and dealing with the lack of energy that's produced. So we've done a number of projects, particularly through the Tohoku Peninsula, which was so devastated by the earthquake and tsunami, and there is a huge amount of integration. So I think these are difficult challenges. People are going to be cold for a long time, I think, and we're going to need to worry about heating. But I think as we bring together numerous technologies and integrate them, and as I said earlier, define policy, define the program, measure, manage, and change behaviours, I think that's the kind of process that will see the numbers you're talking about reduced.
Donald, do you think that electrochemistry can help in this?
Oh yes, electrochemistry is the answer to all of
To
the
everything.
problems.
Nearly, I share your view.
But I think all kidding aside, there is an electrochemical approach here that hasn't been tried, and in part it's due to the fact that the pricing has been such that it has encouraged such use in heating. If we want to, we can design buildings that are neutral with respect to energy, but we haven't done so because it didn't make sense. The cost of energy was so low that it made sense to have poor insulation, expansive windows, and consumption of thermal energy. Now, if we want to get the behavior to be modified, we just have to send a different pricing signal. And if the pricing signal is right, you'll see people changing their behavior. So sometimes it's a case of the necessity hasn't been there. Some of us see the future anyways and work at it, but because we want to invent the future. We don't want to just let the future happen. But I think the question about the consumption of energy in buildings is directly correlated to the cost of energy over the recent history.
And with the likely reduction of price of energy worldwide, with a big development nowadays in oil production, gas production, it's incredible, the massive development nowadays. I think, and we see the signals of the price going down drastically, and it will continue, I'm afraid. how can we deal with that? You as a politician, how can we deal with this reduction of price and at the same time continuing in addressing this big challenge?
Well, you've put your finger on an important issue, and it relates not just to the cheap price of energy, but also the enormous amount of money that is being made on the current fossil fuel infrastructure. It keeps money from being invested in new innovation because there's so much money being made in the way things are right now. And in the United States, the production of most of our energy that's delivered to homes is controlled by utility companies who are regulated by a utility commission that guarantees that they will not lose money on their investments. So if they make bad choices, they don't pay for them. There's no cost to the shareholders of that company. But to the point of buildings, and buildings consume about 35% of the energy in the developed world, 35% of all the energy that is used. And we've found in our town, we need to approach this sector by sector. It's relatively easy to deal with new buildings because you can enact building standards as we have and most cities have that require more energy efficient buildings. Our new commercial buildings in Boulder, Colorado have to be 30% more efficient than is required by the 2012 International Energy Code. And we're on a glide path so that the new construction will have to be net zero by 2030. But there's an enormous existing building stock that we have to deal with. Half of the residential units in our town are rental units, and they come up for rental inspections and relicensing every 4 years. So we have addressed first this market and required them over a period of years, it'll end now in 2019, to increase the energy efficiency of the rental units. All right, we can do that because there's a licensing regime. But for people who own their own houses and have to themselves invest in it, that's something that we haven't quite figured out. We're gonna.
Well, it's not something that we have figured out yet, but people really want to invest in their own home in terms of isolation and new, heating stuff, because they actually pay a lot of money for their electricity every year. I don't know, maybe who of you actually knows how much you pay for electricity every year? I see, well, it's almost half. It's not too bad. It's not too bad. But if you ask people in Groningen, well, everybody says, I know, because in Groningen everybody's very smart, so we all know what we pay there. People actually want to pay less, and that's why there's a lot of room between the cost of solar panels and isolating homes and the bill they're paying right now. So there is this incentive already, and besides that, we have a lot of programs actually, especially for the rental houses, who actually, well, we subsidize them a little bit by some program to, well, better the buildings, and that's I think that's working. And I think the price of energy is right now is at such a level that there's a lot of room there for improvement. So I'm not afraid that this process will stop.
So are European cities exploring a carbon tax to? The reason people don't know about what they spend for electricity is because it's cheap.
Yeah.
Are European cities looking at a carbon tax?
I don't know. I think as cities in Holland, we are not allowed to impose our own taxes on this level. We have other one or two, but I think we do have on a national level some sort of CO2 tax, but it's not that big. And besides that, I think the electricity isn't cheap in Holland. I think it's really expensive, in fact. So people are naturally inclined to make these improvements.
I think that electricity is so important and so wonderful that at the end people do not pay too much attention because it delivers a lot of good services.
The most important thing is that it is there.
Yeah. The problem is more with the heating, because at the end, more or less in average in Europe, we pay 4 times the price for heating, the price of electricity. And there people do not realize that there is a huge potential. So I thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. And now I invite the participants to raise questions if they want. There are 2 microphones in the aisle. So if you want to raise a question to any specific speaker of the panel or to a general question, we will try to answer. But please introduce yourself so we better understand where you are coming from. So who would like to trigger the short discussion with the floor? Yes, please go to the microphone. Thank you. Yes, go to the microphone in the aisle. There are 2 stationary microphones. You are there already. Okay, then the first question over there, because he's already there. Yes, go ahead.
Yes,
Introduce yourself, please.
Yes, I'm Eric Sanderson from New York in the United States. And I'd like to ask the panel, how come we don't talk more about pumped hydraulic storage solutions when it comes to renewable energy? I know there's several here in Europe, and there's some in North America, and it seems that they touch on many of the issues you've been discussing.
Whom would like to address that?
Well, pumped hydro is, in fact, the most widely used form of electricity storage. And it is excellent. It's cheap and it's long-lived, but it's geographically constrained. So you're from New York, you don't have the difference in elevation that you need and access to the plentiful water. So if you can install pumped hydro, by all means you will, but most of the attractive sites are taken. And by the way, you just have to have a difference in elevation. It doesn't mean that you have to have a mountain. If you wanted to, in principle, you could dig down beneath the earth into a large cavern and then pump from level into the ground. But even so, you have to have the storage capacity for large amounts of water, otherwise the effort isn't going to give you much protection.
I think what is important to understand that it's not a technology problem, because obviously there are a huge number and a huge variety of technologies available. We talked about batteries, we talked about redox flow, we talk about pumped hydro, we can have flywheels, we can basically use air pressure, though there are many technologies. The problem is profitability, basically. And in the meantime, in Germany, we have a lot of areas where we have pumped hydro, and the people running those plants now tell me even those old, very cheap storage elements are no longer profitable, because the renewable energy is pushing so hard into the grid that in most of the time we have either sun or wind energy, which is even cheaper, and so pumped hydro and storage is no longer profitable. So I think we really have to think about how can we make it attractive to store energy, or to create more flexibility, which is another way of storing. So it's not only technology. Technology will be made available. It's technically possible if it's really profitable.
There is another huge problem, is the public acceptance. A lot of people do not accept anything now anywhere, and particularly to this type of project. 2 weeks ago in France there was a big demonstration, and a young demonstrator died in this demonstration because there was an opposition to the construction of a water basin. So it's also a challenge between citizen, technologies, and costs. Yes, please, go ahead. Introduce yourself, please.
Camilo Jiménez, trabajo en Untitled Bogotá, Colombia. La pregunta está direccionada a la estrategia que se tiene con respecto a la educación ciudadana o a la conciencia ciudadana para la optimización de la tecnología. En el panel han estado hablando sobre la demanda o la necesidad de reducir el consumo a través de las estrategias académicas que se ofrecen en las universidades. Pero En el global de la sociedad, ¿cuál es la estrategia que se lleva para poder reducir el consumo y hacer efectivo los cambios tecnológicos que están proponiendo?
I don't know if you had the translation?
No. Could you summarize the question?
Yes. I will summarize for the colleagues whichever, and then Michael will answer. The question was if what we should do to raise the awareness of population, because we are offering solution, but population is still wasting and having a contradictory behavior with what they wish and what they are doing. Michael.
Well, I'm not sure I get to answer the question because I had the translation on quick enough, but look, I think Donald touched on it earlier, and I think many of the things that we're talking about, as did Reinhard, are very much affected by pricing. And people are using systems consistently now to provide user pays capability. If we use our telephones, we all get a bill for a few seconds, and people opt in and buy services they need. So I think perhaps the answer to your question is that consumption continues unabated if there's no incentive to do otherwise. And I think increasingly we'll see people opting into services that they value and they readily pay for. And that, I think, the market takes care of demand in those kinds of situations.
Somebody else, maybe from the
I think
politicians in cities?
I don't think there is one answer to this question, because it all depends on what type of city you're in, what kind of people you're living with, and I really do believe that you need to focus on one topic. You don't just have to this message about we all have to be greener and we all have to be more renewable and energy efficient. That's not working. It has to be something that's actually a problem, and people who feel this problem. For example, in some cities I know there's a lot of air pollution because of all the traffic that's going on there. Well, focus on one of these issues and maybe try to raise awareness through this big problem. And I think then we will see what Mr. Dixon was saying, that there will be, well, it will trigger the innovation we need.
I think we are going to have another question, but I think also that the challenge is the fact that on one side we need to educate people, but on the other side we need to keep them on the reality, isn't it, Donald? Because people, it's so easy to dream things which are far away, and at the end it's even counterproductive. Please.
Hello, my name is Joachim Schunowski, Deutsche Telekom Innovation Laboratories. I have a question. Well, first of all, I would make the question in a way like, do we have a sustainability equation? And the point I'm making here is, or the question I have is, while we are talking about sustainability, smart sustainable cities, I make something like an example. If you take a football and you want to play football, the football needs to be full of air, right? If you take the air out of the football, it doesn't make fun. The question, for instance, is therefore about this equation. If we do something like, for instance, fracking, which is providing us with new opportunities for oil, is that the right sustainability equation? So my direct question is then, we're talking about business, and I know that we have to talk about business, but on the other side, how about sustainability? Do we need to have maybe a sustainability tax included in such business models?
I personally believe there is no contradiction between sustainability and business, because there are many technology solutions which are profitable and very sustainable. So from my point of view, when we talk about innovation, I'm responsible for innovation in ThyssenKrupp, we always say our next steps, our innovation has to be on one hand sustainable, and sustainable has, from my point of view, three elements. The one element is obviously it has to be profitable, otherwise it will not, the company will not survive, and if the company not survive, it will not provide the technology. It has to be accepted by the people, it has to be social, because if the people don't accept it, it will not be sustainable because people will not like it, and then at the end it basically has to be environmental friendly, otherwise we will really pollute our environment, and really Earth will no longer be livable. And there are many very good technologies which are in principle available today, and we have to introduce them. And the only big hurdle in many cases is basically the legal environment. So in many cases we have technologies at hand, we have business opportunities, but we cannot use them because the legal environment doesn't allow us to do so.
We have 1 minute left. Therefore, the last question.
Excuse me, can I answer that question as well, please?
If it is very short, yours,
yes.
because time.
I have something to add with that. We actually see this happening in our town. We see that the focus of the customers, they are looking towards the smaller shops that actually have biological projects that are produced in the environment and that are, well, actually, what we want on a bigger scale, we see this happening on a smaller scale. And besides that, you were making a football analogy there, and that for me as a Dutchman in Spain is quite hard these days. So I will not elaborate on that.
Thank you, Jo. Short question, short answer.
Yes, one question, please. One of you mentions cooperation between individuals to share energy, to organize their energy consumption. Is there any real implementation for this kind of scenario? What are the incentives for individuals to share their energy consumption in buildings, in organization? Is it distributed or controlled by a central government? Maybe, I don't know. I just want more information about this kind of scenario. Thank you.
Whom? Macon?
No. The sharing of, actually, Joost, it was your town that now does share energy between, we have structural impediments to doing that.
Okay, well, we do it, but we do it on a very small scale, and we are, in fact, cooperating with the energy companies, with the university, but also with the car manufacturers. You were right about that. So it is possible, but it's on a very small scale. What we really need to work on a national level, not only in Holland, but I think throughout Europe, is to make this more easy for us by deregulating, by looking to the regulations and the laws that are actually protecting the bigger energy companies right now, and we need to focus on that, I think, on a policy level, because the need, we all feel that the need is there, the people really want it, but now we have to make it possible, and that's something we will have to address in Brussels and in The Hague and maybe Madrid, I don't know.
And the way we have done this ourselves, our plan is we're actually purchasing our grid so that all of the Boulder customers will be able to have this sharing. It'll remove the structural impediments.
Yeah. So I think it's time to wrap up, and it's difficult to make a summary of what we have said because there was a lot of information and a lot of nuance in what has been said. We have to admit that it was not straight, maybe except the fact that, yes, we need integration of different sectors, different people, different industries to try to bring much more intelligence in all the system. I think that we have also to admit that we need time. We will not invent a new city today, but we are on track for that. And this needs time, needs fundamental research. I think that one of the big mistakes we are doing is not to push so much for fundamental research, having the courage to invest for long-term research. I don't say that for you, Donald. I say that since a lot of time because I'm convinced of that. But we need also to give visibility to industry. And we need to also allow citizens to be realistic in this, and politicians have the role to guide them. I would like to conclude with one consideration. We talk about sustainable development. I know that there are people who do not want to speak about sustainable development. There are people who would like to talk about sustainability. It's not the same. The Brundtland report do not talk about sustainability. They mention sustainable development. Sustainable is qualificative of development. Without development, we go nowhere. If we just want to be clean, but without development, we will collapse. So it's a big challenge, and also I would like to insist on a small word in the definition of the sustainable development: ability. The sustainable development is not leaving resource for the next generation, but giving them the ability to fulfill their future need. It's totally different. That means that we need to bring people up by education, by information, and stimulating them to have a clean city in the future. I would like that we thank the speakers. Thank you very much. Have a good lunch.